spiritual being, the experience of 2CB allows exploration as far as one needs to go. There is at all times full connection with all parts of oneself, the emotional and the intellectual, the intuitive and the instinctual. It is a superb tool for learning and for growth. And 2CB allows one to recover baseline within 6 to 8 hours using a maximum dosage of 25 milligrams, usually lower in the area of 18 to 20. Another drug mentioned earlier, ketamine, is abbreviation for 2-orthochlorophenol 2-methylaminocyclohexanone, the antithesis of 2CB, in that it effectively separates the mind and the body. This allows the mind a separate and constructive state, apart from the physical groundings of the body. Although the primary clinical application of ketamine is as a dissociative anesthetic, an increasingly important direction of study is now being directed to the psychological loosening that it allows. MAL and CPM are abbreviations of the compounds that are fascinating analogs of mescaline, namely 4-methyl-3,5-dimethoxyphenethylamine and 4-cyclopropylmethyl-3,5-dimethoxyphenethylamine, two compounds that activate opposite sides of the sensorium. The former provokes an intense visual distortion at the retinal level, with consequential bizarre interpretations. The latter displays its effectiveness in the fantasy counterpart, seen only with the eyes closed. Following 65 milligrams of MAL, a quotation, within 2 hours, intense effect, beautiful, diuretic, good connections between parts of myself, continual fantasy and imagery, lovely experience of the erotic with husband. Around 12 hours, excellent solid sleep with clear, balanced dreams. Following 70 milligrams of CPM, at 2 hours, strong effect but no visual. Wonderful locking into music, deep loving, erotic, very good. With eyes closed, intense, colorful fantasy, much like LSD at times. No sleep before 18 hours. Lest anyone should have the impression, by the way, that research in this area leads always to God and to insight and to deeper experiences in loving, let me mention an example of a compound called 4-TASB, which is 4-thiol-ethyl-3-ethoxy-5-methoxyphenethylamine. Following a 100 milligram exposure. At about 2 hours, pleasant and positive, peaceful feelings, very good-humored. Later, sleep impossible until early morning, and then only about 2 hours. All next day could not rest or sleep. Feeling of nerve endings raw and active, anxiety over heartbeat. Frightening effects on nervous system. Depression, back of neck sore from tension. My first experience of being able to detect what felt like continual electrical impulses between nerve endings. Had the impression that if I allowed the wrong sequence of images to flow in my mind, I might experience some sort of convulsion, or at least a kind of mental shock or shorting out. When I tried to sleep, eyes closed fantasies became intensely negative and threatening. I could not smooth out the nervous system. Felt very vulnerable. Do not repeat. Alpha-O-DMS is abbreviation of 5-methoxy-alpha-methyltryptamine, an analog of a neurotransmitter serotonin that has been tailored chemically to allow it to enter into the CNS, into the brain. It is a very potent indole psychedelic that touches closely on those areas involved with primal energies. Several researchers experienced dreams of catastrophic events after exploring this material. One researcher, however, had a dream which involved as a complete science fiction scenario. He found it absolutely enjoyable and is still thinking of writing it up and sending it into a publisher. These are only about a half a dozen or so of many scores of fascinating compounds that are now available for the study of this developing vocabulary. This is where we are at the moment. Some materials show incredible promise, and some suggest caution. But what might we expect to emerge in the future? Let's look at the past history of other areas of psychotropic chemistry. A few decades ago, it was marveled at that drugs such as the opiates, including morphine and heroin, meperidine, could have such an exacting influence on the brain's integrity. Then it became known that there were natural factors in the brain that had these actions, and that there were specific sites in the brain that were pre-designed to respond to them. There were the enkephalins and their fragmented portions known as the endorphins, which were derived from the cephalic process and related to morphine. These met a person's need for the suppression of pain. Perhaps there are enkadelics from the psychedelics, and specific N-escalins from mescaline yet to be discovered that might relate to these communicative factors, which might be which might be connected and eventually related to the natural receptor sites in the brain for transcendental communication. Their structures may someday be known. Their functions may someday be understood. There are a multitude of tenuous threads that tie together the fragile structure of the human spirit. The life-giving with the death-demanding side. The exalted voice with the mundane. The strongly centered self with the drive toward dispersion and loss of center. These all coexist in all of us. But there is an essential blockade between these inner worlds, which I truly feel can be penetrated only with the words and the tools and the understanding that may be most easily obtained through the area of psychedelic experiences. William Blake said in The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, "Man has no body distinct from his soul, for that called body is a portion of soul, discerned by the five senses. The chief inlets of soul in this age, energy is the only life, and is from the body, and reason is the bound or outward circumference of energy. Energy is eternal delight." These are responses to a heartfelt need for some vocabulary, to allow the establishment of a dialogue that might diffuse the accelerating mad moves toward extinction. My personal philosophy might well be lifted directly from Blake. I must create a system or be slaved by another man's. I may be wrong, but I must do what I'm doing. And I will do what I can as fast as I can.